And welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. January 6th, 1 year later, we're going to talk about it. I also have some complaints about the PIAA success formula. Isn't that a shocker?
I'm surprised.
Are you surprised I have a complaint about the PIAA?
I'm surprised.
Yeah. And we're also going to touch on some other trending topics as well.
One of my longest friends turns 50 today. So I'm at that age where lots of people are going through this bucket of cold water. Like we're on the backside of the mountain now.
Okay.
And so I already texted him. I already threw it out there. So, but this is one of my life. I'm not gonna give a shout out because I don't know but it's one of the stages of life I'm in. Okay. Like I hit 50 and now all my friends that I went to school with are slowly hitting 50. And it is.
Were you afraid you weren't going to be able to get that into the show?
Like, no, I just thought.
Were you worried you weren't going to be able to? I just thought of it
while we were here, and I was looking at my phone. So there we go.
How are you feeling today?
I feel good. I tell you what, this is because I'm getting older. This happened again. I went to the mail. Oh, that's another story. I go outside. It's cold outside. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's not warm.
Yes.
And when I come back in, it takes me a while to warm up again. I don't remember this happening to me before.
Okay.
But like I have layers. I have a t-shirt on. And there's points where I'll sit down and then it's like, should I put my jacket back on for a couple minutes to try to get the heat going again?
Okay.
And it's not because it's cold in here. It's just maybe this is another sign of getting older.
Possibly. Are you one of those people? We've talked about this before. I'm like a blanket person, everything else. But for me, I don't get cold very easily.
No.
Okay.
Neither do I.
I'm usually somebody that's trying to I like the room right now. I think we have the thermostat at 67, 68. Because I have a lot of friends and family that 71, 72.
No.
Okay.
No.
See, I can't.
And I've always been a guy too that kind of in the winter we wear, I'll wear a t-shirt around the house if I'm not cold.
Okay.
I don't necessarily wear a long sleeve shirt because I don't want my body, I want my body to stay tough and I don't want to be adding to the wimpiness. But I come in, I take my coat, I go outside to the mailbox and I feel wimpy. By the way, my trip to the mailbox, I think we have almost sent out all of the prizes from the Christmas wheel or the whatever. If the ones we don't have an address for you.
Okay.
So either if for some reason you didn't hear from us, you will be hearing from us. But if you want a prize or if you know someone that won a prize that didn't get it, A, it might be in the mailbox right now, or B, make sure they either reach out to us or we look for us to reach out to them because we still have a couple stragglers. It's one of the things of when you take a person who won it on Facebook, we don't have their address. We just have their Facebook friend.
Sure.
So anyway. But yeah, I walked to the mailbox, I came back, and I was chilly.
No, it's a little cold outside. I was looking through the trending topics today. There's really only one that's kind of consuming multimedia. 1 year later after the Capitol riots on January 6th, it's consuming kind of all the coverage and everything that's happening today. I did not get to watch any of the live coverage because I know that Biden spoke. I know there's a lot of different people coming out and saying things about it. I unfortunately was busy this morning. I didn't really get to watch a lot of it. But I don't know. Where do you want to start? Where do you want to dive into it? I have some kind of off the wall stuff to kind of talk, different angles. We're not just talking about what happened that day, but kind of perspective a year later. One of them, I guess we can start here. I noticed a year later, I'm so much more desensitized to it than other major moments in American history. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Why?
I don't know. So
I think I'm probably with you on that. But the question is why?
I don't know the answer to that. I will say the way I recognized it was I was trying to think back to the year after 9/11. I was trying to think back to the year after even after 2008 and a lot of the housing crisis stuff. I was trying to reflect on moments that were 1 year anniversaries to things that have happened in American history that I've been alive for. And for whatever reason, this didn't resonate the same way the rest of those did. My first thought is that because it was Americans on American soil, I don't know if there's this sense of on a global stage, a sense of embarrassment that I've kind of tried to push it away. However, I've noticed I'm just more desensitized to it. Even seeing the images and seeing some of it happen, I don't get the same fervor I did the day of, or the way I felt a year after 9/11 or, other moments in history. And I don't know why that is.
Yeah, I don't. The thing that has kind of shocked me most is the protection of it, the justification of it, that it has become so politicized that what's the best? It's almost like politics to have gotten to be like parents who cover for their children, and whatever their children do, they're wrong. Like their child could go murder someone in the street, and they'll help bury the body,
So you don't feel desensitized to it at all?
I don't know. I don't. My first reaction is shocking to the people who are trying to stymie an investigation. Like there's certainly a group on the right who doesn't want this investigated, who doesn't want to know what happened. They don't want to know what Trump did or did not do, or anyone else on the right did or did not do. And I think it's clearly, I think a rational person says they're afraid to find out the truth because the truth can't really help them at this point. Because at the beginning they were saying, that's not us. Those are Black Lives Matter people dressing as, and now as it's got further into it, I'm surprised how much they've gone to defend instead of standing up and saying, hey, let's find out what happened. Let's let the guilty and the culprits be guilty, but they are fighting it at every turn. And that's the part. But I thought there was always in America, if you're guilty, let's be guilty, especially from the politics standpoint. But now they're defending, shouldn't we as a country know what Trump was doing at the time?
But we'll hold on for a second, because aren't we doing that? Like, there are FBI investigations, there are people in jail. They're still looking at the video and pulling people out of it and and interviewing and arresting people. They're still making arrests to this day.
Correct. But there are congressmen.
But that's the political
fighting.
Correct. That's the political side of it. I guess.
I'm just shocked that there was an attack.
That's politics. Why does that shock you at all?
It's not when there's an attack on the Capitol building and the structure of government of what we are, and the structure of government that elected them to be in government.
Your sentiment is correct. It's frustrating, it's infuriating, but to be shocked by it, I'm not shocked by it. Why would I be shocked that one side or the other is trying to defend their side in something that took place? That doesn't surprise me at all. I have been pleasantly surprised.
Because by defending it, you're condoning it. You're either condoning it or supporting it in one way or the other.
I think you have a lot of people on the political side of things that are either completely oblivious and just saying it was them, it was that. They're just trying to completely shove it out of their way. This isn't our responsibility. It wasn't actually us. And then I think you have another side of it that are really just trying to navigate the political side and just get to the finish line. And if that means denying it or supporting somebody that was there, so be it. But I'm just trying to get to the finish line. That political side of things does not surprise me one bit. I have been pleasantly surprised at how many people have been brought to justice. I've been pleasantly surprised at the FBI's investigation with this and how they've handled it. And the fact that too, a year later, they're still looking, they're still trying to figure out who was involved and who really was a part of it, who got in. Like I said, for me, what I've discovered, and maybe I'm coming of age, but I'm even talking to you, don't I seem desensitized? I'm not outraged by this political defending of it, because I almost don't trust the government enough. I almost expect it. Why wouldn't they try to hide it or defend it in a way?
I think one of the other, and that's a very valid point. One of the other things that I kind of found laughable is there was this, you could tell by the group, and obviously there's a group of people. It wasn't like a million people that barged in the Capitol. There were hundreds. There were thousands outside in protest, but there was I can do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
And now they're finding out they're ending up in prison, and they're like, oh, I can't do whatever. Well, I didn't know. And there's just this, I don't know if it's laughable or I don't know how to describe it, but these people who thought they could break in the Capitol building with no legal repercussions is just like, you just want to look at them and say, who the hell do you think you are?
Sure. Well, I think,
and now I know who they are. They're a prisoner.
You and I have talked about this a lot. There's a sad side to this, that there were people who just were influenced, whether it was through social media or through politics, wherever it was, to the point where, like you said, they honestly believed they could walk into the Capitol building, like just force their way in and walk into it. And there's a sadness to society that we reached that point.
That if you are that gullible and you are that influenced by social media, then.
But they are, like, I think that's, you and I've had a lot of conversations about, like, what does this mean and where is the world? Now, the funny part, it's not funny. However, when you look at, since January 6th, when you look at what has happened to big tech and the things that they are going through, January 6th really was the last straw of that. The funny, I don't, like you're saying, I almost feel like big tech in a way is getting maybe thrown under the bus. They certainly need new legislation. They certainly need to have the conversations they're having now. However, there's a lot of people that if you're on the right side of this, like, you're just throwing big tech under the bus. Like, this is the algorithm, and this is, how could they just keep showing this stuff to people, and they got brainwashed and everything else. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of different ways that this was politicized. What I've noticed is it's been so politicized to the point where I just today, even trying to get my thoughts together today, a year later about it, it's almost like, like, I don't know. Like, I can't, like, I'm trying to muster up the energy to, like, feel upset, feel scared, feel whatever the emotion would be. And I'm just struggling.
Well,
like,
I tell you
I'm
something,
so over it.
Something that I've learned from you is, your generation, and are you 34 or 33? I can never keep track of your age.
34.
Okay, so you're 30, but like your generation and below, just your trust of the government is zero. And
we don't trust them for anything.
And that is
so different.
I mean, there was a level of that we always joked about politics, and there was like politics and car salesmen and attorneys, and there was always the punchlines of the jokes. But not like this, not like the way your generation sees it as, just beyond corrupt. That I don't even know how to describe it.
Sure.
But like your generation just doesn't buy in at all. Where ours was like, well, this guy's crooked and this. I think our generation still had belief in the system, that we knew there were politicians who were going to take advantage of the system, but we still believed in the system. And I don't think your generation believes.
It's actually one of the only things that really bonds the younger generation. Like, when you look at, like, left, right, at my age or below, one of the bonding things is that, like, there's just not a lot of trust regardless.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's just so, and don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of people younger than me that are very hardcore Republicans. They're very hardcore Democrats. I'm not saying there still aren't factions within that generation. However, one of the very bonding things is, like, you kind of got to look out for yourself because the government probably isn't doing it. So if you care about climate change, like, you probably need to be the initiative because the government's not going to do it. If you care about having retirement, you better come up with your own fund or your own plan because, like, who knows what's going to happen. So there's just not a trust or faith in anything that the government is doing, regardless of what you're registered when you go to vote.
And in general, it's probably a good thing. That your generation feels that way, because that's how. And it's funny because we were having this conversation about minorities, whether it be gender or race or LGBTQ. I was just having this conversation with someone the other day who is my age, and we even said, and the kids just don't care. Like, the kids are so much more comfortable with the LGBTQ community than the old people are. And when you look at race, and when you look at all the minority class, the school age kids now are going to deal with it all so much better than my generation and the older generations did.
Yeah.
Because they just don't care.
Right.
They're like, oh, if you're we, they, if you're gay or straight, if you're black or white or mixed or nobody cares. They care. And I shouldn't say nobody cares. They care so much less than the older people.
Sure. The other part, going just to kind of keep with the January 6th before we move on from it, the other part that, reflecting back now and looking on it, when I think about that day, there is an aspect to it of, like you and I, we get on here, we share opinions, we think out loud. Who am I to call out somebody for having strong beliefs or for wanting to support something, right? I'm not sitting here condemning that. But I've never in my life have I followed someone so closely or have been so supportive of them that the idea of getting on a bus and going somewhere and breaking in somewhere or using physical force to do, it's never even crossed my line. And I think that's a very different generational thing too. Because when you go back and you watch a lot of that, there's not a lot of young people there. And I'm not trying to throw the older generation under the bus. I swear I'm not. But if you go back and you watch that footage, it's a lot of older people. It's people that you wouldn't expect to necessarily be traveling on a bus to storm the Capitol. Because most of the time, revolution, if you think about Egypt 2 or 3 years ago, or you think of these places that revolt, a lot of times it's younger males that don't have anything to do, right? The economy's down, there's no jobs, they have nothing else to do, so they revolt. So when you look at the footage and people storming different buildings stuff, it's younger males. If you go through this footage and you look, there's not a lot of people in their 20s at this. There's not a lot of people in their 30s at this. This was an older style revolt. And so I do think that's one of the things that I'll remember from it. I don't think the idea of a bunch of 20-year-olds getting on a bus and going to storm the Capitol, like, I just can't, like, I just don't, that's not what this was. And most of the time when you talk about people revolting against their government or people upset with it, that's what it looks like. So it's
I get it. The 60s and that was all young, youth-driven. And no, I'm with you. I love, I say love facetiously, the hypocrisy that we've seen from both sides. And there is a skit on Saturday Night Live, and Kenan Thompson did it. I can't remember what, my kid showed it to me. But it was the whole it was Guess Your Party was the name of it. And it's like, my body, my choice. And they're like, well, are you talking about abortion or are you talking about the vaccine? Because, the my body, my choice is big if for the left. If you're talking about abortion, then you get to talk about the vaccine, and now it's big for the right.
Sure.
And the whole Blue Lives Matter. And then they said, and then they showed pictures of, oh, Blue Lives Matter. If you're right, you're very Blue Lives Matter, unless you're storming the Capitol building and you're crushing the police behind the door. So it's incredibly funny that they did. I remember lots of the Black Lives Matter marches, and they, a lot of the right would tell people, if you had a job, you wouldn't be able to protest. But January 6th last year was on a weekday, and when was all the whole, well, they're protesting, why aren't these people at work? And it's incredible how, depending on what side you're on, you can criticize the other side, but when it plays to your favor, you do the same thing that the other side did.
Yeah.
So that has been, I think that's the most shocking thing to me, that people stand up and they are critical of, like I saw someone posted, they were critical of that Joe Biden did something. And somebody on the right was like, shouldn't Joe Biden be at work? And somebody on the left commented and said, I wonder how many rounds of golf Joe Biden has played since he's been the president. And it is so we get so into, we'll criticize the other side, but we don't look at our side and say, well, our side did the same thing, or they do the same thing. And that's one of the things that has shocked me most.
That's most shocking for you. The desensitization for me was shocking. The other thing that will still always, through the last 4 or 5 years, and it kind of, all the totality of it kind of came into fruition on January 6th. I am shocked still at the ideology of people following one person. And I'm still blown away by that. And so whether it's Trump or whether it's people that support Bernie or whoever it is that the idea that like this one person ideologizes everything that you believe in, and you're just true faith blind into the thick of it because you're following that one person. I am amazed at how many of Americans kind of like fall into that camp. I don't think it's the majority of Americans,
I agree with you.
But it's more than what I thought before January 6th and even before this past election.
But don't you think it's just because it's simple?
I think it simplifies everything for everybody else too. This is the other part of it too. I think people like to root for their team, and they like it when their team wins.
I was going to say, before you even said that, I was going to say that's not just about politics. That was about Joe Paterno. That was about Mike Krzyzewski. That was about Dean Smith. That's about Nick Saban. So there's lots of, don't, like, my guy can do no wrong.
Yeah. And I especially like if you talk to younger people, like that's just not, and don't get me wrong, like we still have people that we follow blindly, regardless whether it's an athlete or performer or politician. Like I'm not saying we don't have our people that the younger generation holds up, but it is becoming less and less. I'm still blown away though that some of these people are able to gain these factions, and I just can't imagine ideology of like one person like that. Like it just blows my mind. The other
thing that, and I've said this before, and this will be on my deathbed, this will be one of the things in life that I just don't understand. In sports, as we talk about the following of Paterno or the following of Krzyzewski or whatever, but those people get criticized immensely by their following. The first time I've been to Cameron Indoor Arena I was watching Duke play Maryland, and they were both top 5 teams in the country.
Sure.
And Duke was winning big. They kind of called off the dogs. Maryland was chipping away. And I'm sitting next to a guy who I swear to God looked like Grizzly Adams. You might not know who Grizzly Adams is. Yeah. He was screaming at Mike Krzyzewski like he was the dumbest individual on earth, and that he was going to cost Duke this game. And I'm like, dude, you're up 16. Like, you're fine. And screaming and screaming and screaming until like the last minute. And then he stood up and cheered like he was the patron saint again. Sure. And in politics, people never say anything negative about their guy on their side, at least publicly. And I don't get it, because in sports it happens all the time.
Sure.
So, and I can't draw that connection.
Yeah. No, it's tough. Going along with it, I've just never, the idea of putting somebody else's last name on my bumper blows my mind. And that's both, like, that's red, blue. Oh, that's like sports, entertainment, like just the idea that like you're really like that person.
Wait, hold on. I need to jump in now.
Go ahead.
Ryan Reynolds.
No, I would never.
Yeah, I think you would.
I wouldn't. And I love Ryan Reynolds. I would never put Reynolds 2028 on my bumper. Ever.
I think you would.
In a million years.
I think you would.
I'm looking at you right now, and I'm guaranteeing it. It would never happen. That aspect of it has completely blown my mind. Before we go, let's do the PIAA real quick, because this is bothering me. Can you give me 10 minutes?
You can have this.
Okay. So for those of you who have kids or have grandchildren or anybody who participates in the PIAA with athletics, they implemented a couple years ago a success formula that I don't know if it really solves what they wanted it to solve. The original concept of the success formula is that it was going to force teams that had unfair advantages, non-boundary schools. So your Catholic schools, your charter schools, schools that are allowed to pull kids or athletes from a finite area of space and basically take them from wherever they want. And as they had success, they would have to move up classifications, right? So Correct. If you were a really good single A Catholic school and you won a state championship, you would have to move up to 2A based off of the success.
I remember it happened to Bethlehem Catholic.
Yes.
I don't know how much they grew, but that was that.
So one of the things with this rule, though, is that it applies to public schools. Correct. So if you are a public school and you have X amount of success and you have so many kids move in, you thus now have to move up. So some of the schools that are being affected by this right now, Jersey Shore football, which has, correct me if I'm wrong, lost the state championship 2 years in a row. So they've had
this year they didn't. It wasn't the state final, was it? Wasn't it the state semi?
State semi, okay.
Or was it the state? I thought it was the semis this year. But
so So they have had incredible success the last 2 years. However, they have unfortunately have not quite won the state championship. They're knocking on the door. They're right there. They are being informed by the PIAA that they may have to move up to 5A, depending on what the PIAA finds with whether or not kids moved in, kids moved out, all that stuff. But based off of their success, they may have to move up to 5A. Southern Columbia football is dealing with this again as well. Southern Columbia plays 2A. They are being told that they might have to move up to 3A depending on their move-ins and their transfers, okay? People have different opinions on Southern Columbia. However,
do they?
They do.
Do they?
However, it's a public...
Here are the differences of opinions. If you're in Southern Columbia, you have one opinion. If you're not in Southern Columbia, you have the other.
That's weird because I'm not from Southern Columbia and I don't think I share the same opinion as you. However, they are a public school in North Central Pennsylvania and they're being told they may have to move up because of their success. They've won 5 state titles in a row. I think it's 5.
I don't know.
Okay. Some other local, kind of on the outlets, if you've ever heard of Dunmore girls basketball, they have one of the best girls programs. Dunmore never won the state title. I believe they lost it twice. No, they lost it, the state title, and then the COVID
year they
were still going. They were forced to move up from 3A to 4A, despite the fact that they're a public school and they had never won a state title. And then the other one that's happening right now, and this is the most egregious, Aliquippa, which actually beat Jersey Shore football this year. They are a single A public school. So that's your Sullivan counties, they are tiny. They voluntarily play 4A. So they play up 3 classifications because they're talented and they know they're talented. So competitively, they move up. They won the state title this year in 4A. They went to the PIAA. They voluntarily said, we will play 4A again. And the PIAA said, nope, you won a state title. You have to move up to 5A. So this single A school that out of the goodness of athletic competition moves up to 4A as a public school because they know that they're just going to demolish everybody in single A.
Because that's what Southern did. Oh, no, wait. No, they never did that.
No, never. So they move up to 4A, and now they're being forced to move up to 5A because they're successful. This success formula makes no sense. The whole point of the success formula was to counterbalance the advantages that Catholics and charter schools, private schools, those non-boundary schools had, and it's doing the opposite. You're actually punishing the public schools that are being successful and trying to do it the right way. Now, some of those public schools aren't perfect. Some public schools do get move-ins. It happens all the time.
When you say do get move-ins, you mean recruit?
Well, some recruit, some do have. So, for example, we just played State College. State College, you might have heard of it. They have Penn State University. Have you heard of Penn State?
I've heard of it.
So when they hire a new basketball coach, sometimes that basketball coach has a son, and now he goes to your school. That's not recruiting. However, it's good fortune.
That is a generic's not the word. Organic.
Sure.
That's organic.
Organic in the sense that you happen to have the biggest university in the state. Sure.
Well, I mean, where did he come from now? He came from out of state.
But
right?
this is the point I'm making to you. There's a lot of gray area in what is considered a move-in or a transfer. A ton of gray area. So for the Dunmore girls example, and there's articles you can find online about this, they had 2 girls that basically moved in, didn't play a meaningful second on the season, but were counted as 2 transfers, despite the fact that they're a public school. And thus now they have to move up. So there's all this gray area in this rule. And public schools are essentially if you're a public school and you work hard and you try to do the right things, you get whacked for it. You get punished. And here's the crazy part. And you and I have talked about this before. If you're a successful public school, you're probably going to graduate a lot of the kids that made you successful, especially if you're a single A, 2A, 3A school, because just churn over. It's just hard to continually be great every single year. So now when you move up, the kids that were good enough to get you to move up, they're not there anymore. They've graduated, and now the kids underneath are almost punished in a way because they now have to play up to another level that they technically weren't the reason they moved up. And they're a public school, so you can't just go reload. I
agree with that. I think one of the best examples locally would be Dominic Bragalone at South Williamsport. He is he's not only a once in a generational player, he's a once in a lifetime player.
Sure.
So to think that South Williamsport is going to be as good after he's gone as they were while he was there, he's the best player they'll ever have.
Sure.
And there are other, Mike Messina, Montoursville baseball. They will never have a Hall of Fame baseball player come through Montoursville again. And so yes, in the organic aspect, it is unfair because public schools, the talent levels come and go.
Sure.
This was designed for the recruiting schools.
Yes.
And when you talk about the places like Southern Columbia and ask people from Mount Carmel and Shamokin and all the other places in the coal region as to how many of these kids started in the Southern Columbia School District and how many of these kids ended up in the Southern Columbia School District, that makes it challenging. I also understand from a standpoint that if, Southern Columbia is not just good at football, they're good at wrestling, they're good at lots of sports. So if I'm a parent and I live down there.
You know who's not? You know who no one talks? I believe their girls soccer team is back-to-back.
They want the girls soccer one again, yes.
Back-to-back state champs, but no one calls out
so
their
I
girls
understand that there's a level of if you were down there and you're picking a school district for your kid, this school district seems to be very successful.
Sure.
The question is, let's just say I've heard a lot of stories. And that it's one thing when a family looks at it and says, we want to go there. But it's another thing when people are picking up phones and saying, you should come here.
Okay, so I'm talking about the PIAA success formula. You are talking about what?
Well, I'm talking that this is why the formula was put in, because Southern Columbia isn't winning state titles year after year after year because they had one good crop of kids. It's because they're getting, well, we'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
We'll just leave it at that. What would have been great, as I was just listening to this, what would have been great is if they would have just put Southern Columbia and Aliquippa in the same division to say, so one of you is going to win the state title. You got to beat the other one. That would have been cool.
Yes, but it's still like they just have I don't know. I don't even know where to go with what you just talked about because you're trying to talk about Southern Columbia football and I'm trying to talk about
but Southern Columbia football is the reason for this rule.
I disagree. I think the reason for this rule is because public schools were at a disadvantage compared to charters and Catholics. I would argue, let's say you're correct about Southern Columbia. I would argue that the rules have forced a school like Southern Columbia's hand. Because if you really want to be successful in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to try to do what the Catholics and charter schools are allowed to do. That's the only way to really successfully year in, year out compete with them.
See, I would disagree with that.
How? Okay.
Because
how would a let's use the word normal.
Other than basketball.
No. Let's use the word normal. Okay. I'm a normal 2A, 3A school in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
How do I even compete with the Catholic and charter schools across the state of Pennsylvania on a consistent basis? Because like you said, in a public school, you're going to have those waves where like for 3 and 4 years.
In what sport?
Any sport.
Well,
any sport. Okay. How are you going to
in girls soccer, locally, we do really well. Mm-hmm. We talked about Southern Columbia winning. Montoursville has won state titles. Loyalsock has won state titles. South Williamsport, I think, has won state titles.
Now, see, this is nothing. I'm not taking anything away from anyone who has won a state title in girls soccer. There are 2 different seasons.
And I get that.
So that does, I hate using the word watered down because it is hard to win a state title. However, it's a little different, but continue.
Lewisburg track and cross country.
They've been really good for a long time.
Really good for a long time.
Yep. Lewisburg boys soccer has been good recently?
Lewisburg boys soccer has been phenomenal recently. I think they lost in the state final, but they were really good. Mm-hmm. But there are lots of, the wrestling schools. Now, this is one of the arguments I've heard about this. Because I think, didn't Southern Columbia win the state title in wrestling as a team? Montoursville took second. But when you watch wrestling states, it's public schools all over the place. Now, I've heard someone say that wrestling has been late to the party here of creating these wrestling, that it's been basketball and football that the public schools, and now they're going to other sports like baseball, softball, wrestling.
Yeah, that's a very northern viewpoint though, because down like in the Lehigh Valley area, wrestling got crushed by some of the Catholic schools. Okay. Because like you had some olds like Easton, like you had some real public like dominating schools. And then once the Catholic schools came along, like that kind of started to peter off. Okay. I think you have a system in place where if you're a public school and if you're a coach or an athletic director, whoever you may be, and your goal, your viewpoint is you want to compete at the state level year in and year out, the rules are created at a disadvantage for you, where if you're not trying to do the things that the charters and Catholic schools are doing, you can't compete. It's not year in and year out, not the way that these other schools.
No, I get what you're saying.
So again, I'm not. You put your foot down in a place I'm not willing to put my foot down.
Well,
However,
I'm just saying.
I know. No,
like
I'm
if
just
you
saying.
talk to people from Mount Carmel,
I get it. I understand. I will just say that I do, in other aspects, I would maybe fall into your category. But in the PIAA, to me, no one is more the villain than the PIAA. You're not going to convince me.
I don't disagree with
You're
that.
not going to convince me that a player or a family or a coach or an athletic director or a school is the bad guy for having a kid move in or recruiting a kid, or when the system itself basically is against you. You're not going to convince me of that. The system.
You make a very valid point.
The system that is put in place right now, once you get to the state level, is basically it's to keep the public schools down, because you are not allowed to go out and do the things that these other schools that you now have to compete against.
I don't disagree with any of that.
Yes. So you just can't convince me that they're the bad guys. You can't. You can be upset at them. You can question it. You can all that, but there's no way they're the bad guys. You're not going to convince me of that. We're in a system that promotes it. You have to. If you want to do it year in and year out and be competitive with them, you have to do it.
You have to recruit.
Yeah, you can have one or two classes that are, like you said, once in a school's lifetime, and you can pull it off. But if you want to do it every year, like you can't. You have to be able to do the things that these Catholic and charter schools are allowed to do. And listen, not every Catholic school does it. But here's the thing. Not every charter school does it, but the good ones do.
But this is the thing. You're not allowed to do it. And I understand that it's not fair.
Yeah.
But when you're the other, the rules are set in place. Mm-hmm. The rules are not fair.
Correct.
But the rules are set in place.
Okay.
So it is hard for me to take all the public schools who are following the rules and say, well, it's okay that these couple public schools break the rules because they're breaking it to compete.
Which is a great point. But I would just say, I'm not here to say it's okay. What I'm here to say is I'm not going to condemn them before I condemn the PIAA.
And that's fair.
I'm going to first call out the system that is essentially, in a way, forced their hand to compete at that level. If you listen, your argument is correct. If you're a public school that wants to follow the rules and your number one goal is not to compete at that level, then you're exactly right. But if you're a public school and you're like, no, the goal is to do this every year. The goal is every year we want to have kids compete at the state championship level, scholarships, we're going for it. This is what we're doing. The only way you can do that is to try to duplicate what charter and Catholic schools are doing. It's the only way, year in and year out.
And I agree, but that's not the solution. The solution has to come from the PIAA.
100%. I totally agree with you.
Okay. By the way, do you know who went to Aliquippa?
Who went to Aliquippa? Did he really?
Yep. Aliquippa High.
There's a lot. Who else? Montana? I mean, there's a ton.
Well, Western PA. I don't know which ones actually, but like Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas. There was another.
Was it Namath, or am I getting that wrong?
It might have been.
I thought Namath was.
I think honestly, I think Ken Griffey Jr. was actually even born in Pennsylvania. Now I don't know because his dad would have been in Was he in Cincinnati? I think Ken Griffey Jr. was born in Western PA too, and I'm not sure if that's true. But be that as it may.
Yeah. All right. Nice. Anything else you want to give a shout out before we go?
I thought I did. What's happening tonight?
Maybe you did it at the very beginning of the show when you completely just threw that out there.
No, I thought there was something else that was happening in the world. Maybe not. No, maybe just January, just bracing for the weekend.
That's what it is. This week flew by. Did it for you?
Well, I'll tell you what. While I was catching up on prizes that we're sending out. This is what happens to, I think, everyone every year, that you get between Christmas and New Year's, and you're kind of like, we're just going to dial it back. And then you push all these things. Once I start back in, I'll get in. And then you realize once you start back in all these things that have piled up.
Yeah.
And you realize there's not 36 hours in this Monday
Right.
just because you want it to be.
Right.
And now you're into Thursday and you're still trying to filter through all these things that you pushed off between Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah. No, I'm with
So
you.
that's happened to me.
No,
That's where
definitely
I'm
makes sense up. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Thank you to Weiss Markets for being our title sponsor. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all your local news.
And I also want to say that you gave me this nice thing here and you just piled it on my desk. And you're like, here, you just threw it on my desk. And that's why my desk is so cluttered, because when you have stuff, you just throw it on my desk.
So I'm supposed to apologize for giving you a useful thing? Is that what's happening?
No, the next time you make fun of me for having a cluttered desk, I want you to know you contributed.
Okay, I can try.
No,
Let's
you
see
won't.
what I can do. No, I'll try.
You have an attitude.
Thank you guys. Again, if you want to listen to the audio version, you can take this on the go with you. Go to Spotify, search the Midday Show, subscribe, rate, and you can listen to us in the car now. Audio format. We have a podcast.
It's cool.
I guess this was a podcast, but now it is a podcast. Did that make sense?
It was, but now it is.
It was, but now it is.
Hmm.
That's good. That'll make sense.
There you
I'm
go.
Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. We'll see you tomorrow.
See ya.